Baker, as you know. Man, you guys are all awesome, but as a group, you're just terrifying. Just so you know. All right. Well, I'm up here because we're in the middle of this series called That's My Story. And I really do like it. I agree that each of us sharing our own story with each other is, really important. I don't think our journeys are meant to be kept quiet. I think your story, no matter how little you think it might be, can be used to help someone. And so I think it's really important we tell it. So that's why I agreed to do this. I'll start my story when I was a lot younger. When I was about 11 years old, I started struggling with just a little depression. It started off just kind of feeling, it was kind of sad and lonely, and I've kept myself a lot. I was kind of a loner, so that obviously didn't help. As I got a little older, it grew into thinking about suicide and just a lot of, dark feelings. When I was about 13, I started hurting myself, cutting, things like that, as a way to deal with it because I didn't really know any other way. And like I said, I kept myself, so I just didn't talk about it with anyone, unfortunately. And it pretty much ended up ruling my entire teenage years. It would kind of come and go for a little bit at a time, but it'd leave for maybe a couple weeks and then it'd come back. And it ended up, obviously causing a lot of hurt in other people and friends, my family, and just everyone that it ended up involving. But because I ended up struggling with it for so long, by the time I was growing up and on my own, it was just an addiction. It was really strong, and I just kind of figured that's how my life was going to look because it had lasted that long. My husband, Brian, was back there playing the drums. We met when I was 18. We got married when I was 20. And at that point, we started just kind of partying and drinking, just kind of the things that kids, tend to get into. But I discovered that drinking was kind of a way that helped me to get rid of that ugly part of myself. Kind of, calms you down, kind of takes the edge off. And so, unfortunately, it ended up creating this whole new awful part of me. I won't get real detailed. You can just trust me on this one. I just wasn't really a great person. I would say ask Brian, but he has stories that don't need to be told, so just trust me on that one. I was mean, I was stubborn, I was rude. I was just not a very decent person to be around. When I drank, I turned into this loud, crazy person who would do stupid things that no one should do. And I hope when I say that, you're like, no way, I can't believe that, because I don't want you to be like, oh, I can see that about her. That's not, I hope that it's really hard to believe, because I was just a really different person. And I just started drinking a lot more. By that, I mean every day, as early as possible, whatever was available. Just didn't really have standards when it came to that. And as time went on, surprisingly, the alcohol stopped doing its job of keeping away the depression, and instead they began mixing with each other and just making things a lot worse. And things just got really bad, and I just got really crazy for a while, weird, creepy, crazy, and it wasn't good. I got pregnant and had Sam when I was 24, and I did, pause that kind of lifestyle while I was pregnant, which was really nice. It was a good little break. But when I had him, it actually made things harder having a kid, surprisingly. After I had him, I fell back in a lot harder even than before, and I think I hit rock bottom when he was about 6 months old. I was drinking, by myself just every night. I was lying about it to my husband about how much. I was really depressed. I was, still hurting myself at 24 years old, and just thinking about suicide quite a bit. I remember just driving home, just wanting to kind of take my hands off the wheel and just see what happens. And it was just really bad, honestly. Just kind of gave up any sort of hope that life would get better. I just came to terms with the fact that this was my life, that it was how it had always been, it was how it would be, and that was just what it was. I had no idea how I was going to be a decent mother to this little boy I had. I assumed my marriage wasn't going to last because I was just a really terrible wife, and I felt like I was just failing in general, just being a person. I mean, just wasn't good. At this point, we had been coming to this church about 7 or 8 months. We started coming because Stephen and Julie were coming here, just Brian's brother. And we decided since we were about to have a kid, he needed to be in church because that's what you do when you have kids, you get them in church. And since they were coming here, we just figured it was the best place to be. So kind of a weird reason, but I assume now it was just kind of God's only chance at getting us here. This one Sunday, it was September 25th of 2011, we came to church, and I sat in the back row, like back over there, and I remember it. We were in the last message of the Sun Stand Still series, and the week before had been particularly awful. But I was here, and Todd came out on stage, and he started saying that he had this great message planned, and it was going to be really good. We're all going to leave encouraged, but that he wasn't going to preach it. He said there was something else he wanted to talk about that just came up, and he needed to preach about it. And he started talking, and I freaked out immediately. Like, I knew that he was talking to me. I felt like there was like a spotlight that moved on me, or like Todd was like standing there pointing at me like, "Are you listening, Rebekah? Like, this is for you." And it was just straight to me, and I just bawled the entire time. He started saying these things about how there's this battle for our attention that we usually don't even know about. How there are all these voices that are either lying to us or telling us the truth, and we have a choice as to who we listen to. And I guess that's what clicked for me. You know, in my life, I thought that the hand I had been dealt was just kind of what I had to work with, that I was given this handicap that I had to learn to live around, you know, that I had this depression thing, this addictive personality, this, you know, gene that made me broken inside, and I couldn't actually ever fix it. The best I could hope for was to suppress it or to learn to work around it or whatever, but it was always just going to be there. And to hear someone say that that was a lie I've been listening to, that I could be changed, that I actually had a choice, that I could listen to a voice, you know, that said I was worth something, that said I had a chance at life, and it just clicked that day. I prayed that day, and I gave up everything I'd been doing, everything I'd been using to try and fix myself, and I surrendered everything to God. And I can honestly tell you that moment, like, I changed that day. I felt like lighter and cleaner, and I just felt at peace, and it was nothing that I had ever, you know, felt before. And when I knew I was going to be up here sharing this, I knew that the biggest thing that I needed to share was that I was such a huge wreck. There wasn't any hope, and in this one moment, you know, God saved me. And even though I'm nowhere near done or good, I'm just so much better, and even just a different person than I was. But I also wanted to try and think of how I could tell you what actually happened that day, like what actually made it different. Because I had tried God, like in the past. I grew up in a Christian home, in churches. You know, my parents were godly people, kept me in church, and I tried God a lot in the past. I mean, I got saved every time they did the altar call, like every single time. I was like, oh, just again, just to make sure. You know, maybe this time I'll say it differently or something. You know, I recommitted and repented and just did all that stuff. And I asked God to take away the sadness. Like, I really did. I prayed, and I never understood why he didn't. I never understood why, if God was so good and loving and powerful, why he couldn't just take away the depression and make it stop. I didn't know why it didn't work. I guess what I realized is that he doesn't necessarily take things away from us. We have to give them up to him. And what happened to me that day was I was at a point where my options had run out. Up until that point, alcohol had been an option when I was depressed or stressed out or had a bad day or whatever. You know, just kind of took the edge off. So was cutting or thinking about suicide or anything else, not eating, partying, shopping, other people, turning to other people. There were things I did that could make me feel better for a little while. And I had things I did that when I started feeling, you know, that sinking feeling inside, that hopelessness, helplessness, the feeling of wondering, you know, what the heck I was doing with my life, and if I would ever actually be happy, I had things I could turn to. And they did work, even if just for a little bit. They took it away. But I always knew it was going to come back, and it always did, and it had for a solid 14 years. I mean, it just constant. There wasn't even longer than a couple weeks break. And I finally decided I was just done with those options. The week before that Sunday, honestly just gave up. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew that I was done trying. I wasn't going to try and not be depressed. I wasn't going to hide drinking. I wasn't going to try anymore to be a good person. I just didn't care anymore. And I told Brian that week that I was just done, and I didn't care. And nothing was working, and it was just exhausting trying. So that Sunday morning, I had no more options, and I guess what I heard that day was God asking to be my option, and I let him. And that day I made the decision that God was going to be my option, not my first option, or my last, my best, but my only option. Because that night, same night, that Sunday night, when those thoughts about wanting a drink, or that the depression was not, actually gone for good, started coming in, I just refused it. It wasn't an option. I didn't ask God to take away the depression feeling. I asked him to give me the peace that the other things had given me before, because I knew I couldn't turn anywhere else, because I knew those things weren't going to work, so they just stopped being a choice that I could make. Before it was like, God help me, but if you can't, I can always fall back on this. Like, I know this will work. Or God help me not to do this thing. Like I was choosing between God and the other thing, but that can't be how it works. God isn't another option, or he's not even, our option when something else doesn't work first. He doesn't work like that. He needs to be our only option, our only hope, the only place that we turn to. The point I was at, I knew nothing else was going to make me feel better. He was my only chance, the only hope that I had, and if he didn't help me get through the day, I wasn't going to make that. Like, literally, I wasn't going to make it through. And I honestly believe that's the only reason that I haven't looked back since that day. I didn't have anything to look back on. I can see maybe if you have things that are working out, things that, are going good, it might be kind of hard for you to give everything up. It's just that I didn't at that point. Everything I had was just a pile of junk. I had ruined my marriage. I ruined my body. I was well on my way to ruining this beautiful son I'd been given. I ruined every relationship I ever had. Everything was just ruined. And every option I had was either hurting me or hurting someone else. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you're struggling with something and you think you've tried God, or you feel like you've done the Christian thing and it didn't work, then you did it wrong, because you don't choose every day between allowing your addiction to make you feel better or God. You stop allowing your addiction to be an option. You just give it up once and you don't look back. And when that moment hits where you would normally turn to your addiction, you say, okay, God, here's where I need you, because if I don't have you, I'm going to die. Like, I'm just not going to make it. Not that if he doesn't come through, you're going to fall back into your addiction, because that's not an option. It's just God or nothing. And that's just the way that it has to work. For me, it was God helping me, or I was going to just not continue existing, because I didn't have anything in me that could make me go. I wasn't going to get out of bed. I wasn't going to be able to go to work. I couldn't love my husband or my son. I couldn't function if he didn't get me through. And because everything I'd been using before to get me through wasn't an option anymore, I had to, turn to him. I couldn't take medicine. I couldn't drink. I couldn't smoke. I couldn't be depressed. I couldn't hurt myself. I couldn't turn to someone else, because I gave up those things because they weren't working. And he still is the only thing that gets me through each day and each moment, because I know nothing else works. And he's gotten me through every day since then. I stopped doing all those things that day. Like, it wasn't even gradual. And maybe it's different for everyone. I do things full on when I do them, but I went home from church and I got my alcohol out of the fridge and I poured it down the sink, and I remember Brian just standing there like looking at me like, what are you doing? And I said, I don't need it anymore. And I haven't been depressed. I haven't hurt myself. I haven't wanted to drink or anything like that since then. And before, yeah. I mean, I was lucky to get through just a couple days, maybe a week before then, and it's been, a very long time. So I was like worst case scenario, and I don't believe there was any other hope for me. And so if I can be saved from that, then I guarantee anyone can, and I really mean that. You just have to give up those other options. And I appreciate you listening to me. I hope that, it helps somebody letting me share my story. If there is anyone, that deals with these things, I know they're really common things, so I'm sure that there are people that do, but if you have anyone wants to ever talk or pray or whatever, you can't freak me out in any way, I promise. So just let me know, and, I'll talk, or you'll talk, I'll listen. But anyway, I thank you guys for listening, and I hope you have a good day. Thanks.
Isn't that awesome? Let's give her another hand. It takes a lot of guts to get up here and talk about stuff like that, so I really have a lot of respect for her. She must have an awesome husband that really supports her a lot. The cool thing about this is, though, that we all have a story to share. On every table out here, there should be a card that looks like this. Can everybody grab one and hold it up if you see one? Okay. What we want y'all to do is just take this and fill out a short little testimony, or a little anything, praise report, anything that you have that you want to share. Just write it on this card and take it back to the basket whenever you're done. And we're going to do something special with it towards the end of this series. So we have a few more weeks, but please, everybody, just do it. Right there. And there's also our email addresses on there. If you have a longer testimony, or if you don't want to do it right now, you can email it in to us. But anyway, let's pray real quick.